building and solve problems together. They do not, it does not always need to be, you don't.
I'm a tractor. Last I checked, that you signed up for the job, you know your responsibilities, and farming, the beans will wait till tomorrow.
Anyway,
You got,
yeah.
yes, we are. So that's my discipline for today. So before we go any further, you have any disclosure of pecuniary interest in general or general nature thereof concerning this agenda?
No, I don't, sir.
Okay, I thought I'd cover that. So we are right now still on 5A, which is draft property standards bylaw discussion. We're actually getting fairly close to the end, but I will certainly allow you to say whatever you have in your mind on what you have read. The concerns of council right now is that it's a fairly intensive, extensive bylaw. However, Mally from Alt and Alt has advised us that this is a good tool to use, and staff will come up with a policy that allows them to work within it that still makes it reasonable enough to use, because some of the concerns we had relayed were every house, almost 90% of the houses in places in South Dundas could be not in compliance if you get as fussy as we are. So
Thank you. I apologize for not checking my calendar.
So Nicole, if you feel that this is the tool you need in your toolbox, I'm willing to accept that. I do believe that, as Deputy Mayor Gardner brought up, I think your policy and how you're going to work with this is key, and how you're going to work your way to, okay, this is the tool, but where do I get to the point where I have to use the tool because somebody isn't in compliance? And you don't want to be prosecuting somebody for something that technically is in there, but then you're going to court and the judges are going to look at you like really stupid and say, you seriously took up my time or to deal with this petty thing, figure it out. So I think as long as it's in that regard, then certainly willing to put it out there and see if there's any further comments. But and I do believe there are times you really, really need to be have this kind of tool in the toolbox to deal with people, because as we find out, if we don't have well-worded bylaws, some people, not all, but that 5% will find that little loophole and then say, I'm going to do what I did because what it says in there I don't feel comfortable with. If you don't like it, take me to court. And then you say, oh, well, I don't know if we've lost in court because we thought we had something good, and then we end up not having something good enough. So I agree, to that point, it makes logical sense. As long as the common sense that we need to use when we send people out to enforce this is used well, because the last thing we need as councillors and mayor is phone calls. Oh, your staff's coming down here and they're complaining about petty things, and I'm going to lose mine. And we have to, as long as it's reasonable. I think the key is reasonableness in the whole scheme of things. So my comments. Anything you wrote down, Councillor Mellon, or did you get a chance to read it all? And
Yeah, well, roughly.
it was a lot. I won't disagree.
Yeah. No, it's so far, it's workable. Yeah.
Okay, anything further? Okay, so what's the next steps for this?
We will review the enforcement policy for staff, and we'll discuss with Mally and Warren at Alt and Alt, make sure there's no legal infractions happening, I guess, and make sure there's no abuse of power now or in the future.
Okay, and then from a public point of view, are we going to put out anything more notice, or?
I'd like to put it out for a couple of weeks.
I believe we should. I think this is a pretty intense document, and if there's, I want to make sure that we all said we were going to be open and transparent, and if we just put this and do it quickly, I don't think that's acceptable either. So that sounds like a plan. Anything further from council? Okay, thank you on that point. Mally sticking around for the next one, or is she done?
So I'm going to trade now. Warren Leroy is going to take over to manage the discussion about the AMPS bylaw.
Okay.
Don't be alarmed when I pass him. My headphones were married, so we're in the same bubble. Anyway, but if you have any other questions, I'll be in touch with Nicole about the property standards bylaw. And I will just reiterate that I see prosecuting any of these types of offenses as a last resort. I would always, so if anyone's ever asking my legal advice, it would be, is there a way that we can deal with this without going to court? Because your point was well taken. That, I mean, I certainly don't like standing up in front of a justice of the peace and having them say, why are you wasting my time? And I'm the one that they'll say it to. So, yeah, no, I agree that we want to be use discretion whenever you're deciding whether or not to do that. And it's really only in the cases where we have no other options.
I guess we can always say that our legal advice says that the chances of prosecution are very small, so we're not going to take it to court.
I say, yeah, the line is no reasonable prospect of conviction, and we use it all the time. I'm often consulted on these sorts of things, and often my advice is that it's not worth prosecuting. So I don't take it lightly. It's a high standard that I would have to prove whenever we go to court on any of these. And I mean, if we've got a really complaining neighbor and they want to know why we're not going, first of all, in most cases, we don't have to tell them. But if we need to give somebody an explanation, just the fact that we can't meet the legal burden is reason enough. It's not worth the taxpayers' money to be going to court to fight on cases we're going to lose.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your advice, and you can pass yourself over then.
All right, sounds good. Have a good meeting, everyone.
Yeah, thank you again.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Warren. So we'll move on to the draft administration penalty system bylaw discussion. Nicole again.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you have draft administrative monetary penalty system bylaw. The province recently, I believe, and Warren can speak to this a little bit better than I can, but released a regulation pertaining to administrative penalties. And the intent of that was to try and get a lot of the provincial offenses charges under parking taken out of the court system. So it's taking up a lot of time for legal teams and justice of the peace to deal with these parking infractions. So the intent is that municipalities take on the role in-house to remove those from the court systems themselves. So before you have the draft bylaw, which works in conjunction with our our parking bylaw. And maybe Warren could explain it a little bit better than I can.
Okay, Warren, you have the floor then, please.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. What the bylaw is doing is not creating any new offenses. You already have a parking bylaw. The intent of the AMPS bylaw is to simplify basically the prosecution process. So what happens is if there's a violation of the parking bylaw, an officer can simply issue a ticket, typically for relatively low fines. Those fines are subject to a review process, a two-stage review process by two sets of officers. And there's timelines in the bylaw within which the person who gets the notice has to make the review request, and then they have to pay the fine. And it's designed to discourage people from essentially parking in front of hydrants or on highways and that kind of thing. It's really just an efficiency bylaw.
Okay. So, council doesn't mind. Here's my question to that. It still allows whoever got the ticket to have his day in court?
I can speak to that. After a fashion, yes.
Okay.
Although it doesn't actually proceed through the justice system. What happens is the officer issues the ticket.
Yeah.
And within a certain period of time, I believe it's 45 days in the draft, the person who gets the notice or the ticket can request a review. And then a municipal employee, someone who's appointed by the township, reviews the ticket. And essentially what they're looking for is on a balance of probabilities, was the vehicle in contravention of the bylaw, or would the imposition of the payment of the fine create undue hardship. And if the reviewing officer finds that the officer was correct to issue the ticket, they affirm the bylaw, or they affirm the ticket. If the person that gets the notice remains unsatisfied, they can request a further review to a hearing officer, and that officer really has the final say.
Okay. Okay, that sounds fair. Would be my one concern. Okay.
So a couple of questions. One, currently now the MTO search fee. How do you guys verify, because I'm not familiar with the process, so how do you get the information? It goes directly to the ministry to do it, or have bylaw officers ever had access to the system to check like license plate and addresses, all that fun stuff?
So we do have access to that system,
Okay.
but we currently haven't really been enforcing under it.
Okay.
Our tickets for our parking bylaw currently have just been kind of kept in-house. We haven't gone to the courts much.
Okay, so is that like a
Past.
new, like the search fee? So you put a fee on just to search?
Yeah, so currently we have to pay to do the search through the
Okay.
MTO,
Okay,
and this would charge that fee to
okay.
the ticket holder.
Okay, and with this process, what about out-of-towners, like out of province?
I'm not sure that we can enforce an out-of-province ticket. If they leave the province, we can't enforce them to actually, it's the
You
same,
can't,
it's the same rule under the
Yeah.
Provincial Offences Act.
okay,
This is just a separate regulation to reduce the amount of times that we have to actually go to court.
okay,
And I can speak to, so if someone appeals their ticket, they don't have to appeal to the ticket issuer. So if I issue a ticket, they have to appeal to someone other than myself. So that way there's no conflict in decision.
I don't know, I don't usually fight I'm strictly thinking of traffic tickets, and I know it's different, but when I get a ticket, review it, look at it and stuff like that, and it just, if I had to, I'm thinking of the process, if I had to then go through the OPP and have another officer review, I'm just saying as an example, because the residents are gonna look at this, you issue me a parking ticket, I'm gonna hand it back to one of your colleagues to review it. I find that interesting. Like I get that it's reducing whatever, and I'm not saying that there would be a bias. I'm just saying that
So for instance, if my officer issued a parking ticket and someone was agreeing it,
yeah.
I could override that based on a decision if there's undue hardship.
So how do they prove undue hardship?
If they have photographs saying they weren't parked in that area at a specific time, or if the ticket's misfilled out.
Okay.
There's
So that's not
multiple-
okay.
multiple avenues people.
Okay. Oh, I'm yeah.
We'll
Look at the
argue, for
dates,
sure.
the printing, the correct license plate. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Just saying.
you have to be very fussy when you fill out those tickets, because somebody wants to grieve it. They're going to look for every nook and cranny to figure this out. Been there, done that.
So are most, like, is this something that the municipalities across Ontario are doing?
So I know North Dundas has been working on their bylaw as well, so we've kind of been working with them throughout the past couple of years. And some of the other townships throughout Western Ontario have been
Okay.
drafting bylaws similar to this.
Okay. The education component of this will have to be fairly, because it's a significant change, right? And depending on how it's presented, it's going to look like we're reviewing our own homework. So people may feel like they're not, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not, again, it's how the public views when an organization reviews their own stuff. Most people don't like that, so.
And I believe, so outside of the first appeal, the second higher up, I believe has gone through the counties, is it not, Warren?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
It's also, it might be helpful to know that the jurisprudence on these AMPS bylaws have confirmed that even although the administrative component of the bylaw ends at the hearing officer, it's still subject to what's called a judicial review. So if somebody really wanted to, they could have their $30 ticket reviewed by a judge, a Superior Court judge. So there is the courts do play a supervisory role in this, as they always do. So it's not just the township. It
Yeah.
can be elevated. It can be escalated to a court.
Yeah, I think, when you're using the terms, I think peer review is kind of a more what's happening, right? You're having a second opinion, if you will, to see if it was viable. So it's interesting. I'm not saying I would fight a $30 ticket, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's the logic, right? It's supposed to deal with minor infractions.
Yeah.
So the stakes are relatively low, and what's happening is provincial offenses courts are being inundated with people contesting very, very moderate fines for relatively minor infractions. The hope is that a lot of this just gets streamlined out with this relatively simple process.
So if with this process, would you? Because I've fought a speeding ticket before, so I requested the officer's notes as well as the radar calibration. In this case, if you fought it at this level, it's just a review, right? The fight would be at a different level, just for clarity, right?
So I can tell you that myself and Justin, our bylaw officer, we do take photographs of each parking infraction.
Yep.
And we do have a copy of that ticket that we issue. So if people were to come back and appeal, we would have that evidence to say this is why you were in the wrong and this is why you were issued the ticket.
Perfect. Good.
Okay. Councilor Lewis?
The question that I have for you, Nick, do you think maybe you're putting a little bit too much on your plate? Like, I don't want to get you overwhelmed and where you're gonna all of a sudden come back to council and say, well, we need more help.
So I don't think this changes our staffing requirements. It just takes our requirement to go to court to prosecute outside of the courts. So we have that internal option where we don't have to go to Cornwall to go to courts to argue an appeal. We can just do it in-house. And we can have, save time and taxpayers' money.
Okay, no. I'm good.
If it works correctly, it should reduce staff time.
Okay,
Because they don't have to go witnesses at trials and stuff is the hope.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, like I know from my experience being on county council, sometimes you think it's pretty straightforward. A lot of these traffic tickets and a lot, the speeding tickets, the offenses on the 401 and people, they're living in, GTA or wherever. They're quite willing to use any and every tool to fight a fine, especially some of the larger ones. But having tools in the toolbox like this, as Warren seems to, explains it, and I appreciate the explanation because it's hard when you're reading this as a council member. It doesn't make any logical sense from a judicial point of view because, I guess, I wouldn't say I know the court system real well, but I'm one of these sticklers that if someone complains or someone has a fine or has been charged, they're always innocent till proven guilty, and they always have the court system to deal with. Might cost them whatever, but I mean, and right to the end, right to the Supreme Court, you can decide that. Now, I wouldn't advise a $20 ticket going to the Supreme Court of Canada because I don't think you'd get there, but I mean, that's how our system's built. So we have to be fair and do the best we can. And as long as there's somewhere for that person to, if we say, it goes to Nicole or Justin gives the ticket and Nicole says it's good, that person still has the right to go further up. To me, it starts costing them coin, but that's up to them. But anyway.
Okay.
Before you fall asleep over there, Councilman Mellon, you have any comments?
Yeah, well, the plate denial, the MTO plate denial, and the deputy mayor already touched on that a little bit. With our location to Quebec, is there any other mechanism other than plate denial for collecting from the province of Quebec? Because we can't collect from them. Or they don't, that plate denial part doesn't come into effect for Quebec when they go get their license if they got an outstanding ticket. It doesn't, is there any other mechanism that we can utilize? Because I think we're, for the rest of the province, sooner or later, whether they fight it in court or whatever, but with Quebec, it's just, we're out the window.
So, There is, I make a note in this, there is a way to convert the, once a ticket has been, or rather a notice has been affirmed, there is a mechanism to convert it to an in personam judgment. You can apply to a judge to have that done. Most of the other municipalities, in fact, I haven't found one yet that actually has that, that machinery built into their legislation, simply because the cost of doing that to the township for $30, it's almost never worth it, right? So, and that's how you do it. You get a judgment against this person that wouldn't be bound to a license plate. But again, the cost of obtaining the judgment it would be many multiples higher than the actual value of the ticket. So practically, not really. Theoretically, yes, there is an answer to that question.
Because under provincial fences, like that's one of the biggest issues with tickets on the 401, and probably are gonna find it in here. You know, any tickets that we issue, if it's from Quebec and our location, which is only 30 minutes or whatever from the Quebec border, but I'm just curious if there was any other thing that we could do. But, I mean, if it's too restrictive to try and use the system you're referring to, it's probably not worth our time.
No, and I wouldn't recommend. I mean, we can build the machinery in, so staff has the option, but it's never going to get used.
Yeah, if you're from Quebec, just let it go. It's just one of those things. However, I advise you, if you've got a ticket from Quebec, you may want to pay it because you'll never be back there again. They'll find you. It doesn't work both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back, like if we get a ticket in Quebec, it goes on our, I think.
There is some,
You know, it goes back
back and
this way.
forth.
So we
Depends
can't
on
get
the
our plate,
ticket.
But it's not the other way. Something we need to work on. Not at this level, but at the next provincial level.
yeah. But from fines that we have, it's not really a big problem. I would suggest that most of our infractions are from Ontario plated people that live in South Dundas.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sooner or later, we're gonna collect. I don't know.
Yeah.
How many would we fight? How many would fight on an average? Would you have a number?
Maybe 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just, you're always going to have somebody who objects. It's just, that's life. So,
I could have been fighting one coming down here if they would have stopped me.
that's not our problem. So, question I have, when you come down to, I guess it was on page 50 of our report, Schedule A, there's a comment about early payment in column 3. Do we have an early payment, or is that something we should actually just make disappear? Because
Yeah, so Warren and I have discussed this. So we do have a current early payment in our parking bylaw. We've decided that it would be best to have that disappear, just for ease of administrative procedures, I guess. It just is time consuming to notify people that there's an early payment, and then if the early payment is missed, then you have to change the fee. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's
No.
just time consuming and confusing to people. So we have discussed that in removing it out of this draft.
I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it makes logical sense. I don't know why, I can understand it it was a good start, because remember, we came from nothing when this was put in. I wasn't on council when this got passed in 2015, but I also remember being on council when this started in 2013 or 2014, and there was already, we had nothing, and going from nothing to this can be a big jump. And people were already, I bet you that we still have lots of complaints around Giant Tiger and the no parking there, which are very logical no parking zones, considering it's our main fire route out of the village. But I mean, to have an early payment, like this isn't, we're not a grocery store or somewhere you go, you get a semi-free ride. I don't think we do. I think
No, it sounds like they took the early resolution and did a discount.
Yeah. If you don't complain, this is how much you
Yeah,
pay.
yeah.
If you want to complain, but if there's more work involved, I don't see any point. You have your hand up, Councilor Mellon?
Yeah, like when you mentioned there, like, the no parking, right, Giant Tiger near the fire lane and stuff, we have no parking signs there. Would it be beneficial at all for us to even add on to it and say the amount of the fine would be? Sometimes dollar and cents speak louder than, oh, no parking. Well, okay. If you throw the no parking up there with the dollar amount, you know, a $60 fine, no parking, $60 fine or something, I don't know, is that, would you find that beneficial or a deterrent? Let's face it, we don't necessarily want to be getting the fine, but we've got to do something to make sure that people aren't parking when they're not supposed to or doing whatever they're, you know, especially in those, you know, those areas that are, you know, obstructing either, you know, in a school zone or a fire zone, you know, something like that.
Go ahead.
So I can say, since we changed our hours and patrolling, the amount of cars parked in that area near Giant Tiger have reduced significantly. And people are aware that we're outside of regular hours, and we have been issuing tickets regularly. So I think it's just an education on the public that there's a reminder, here's the fire department, you can't park obstructing safety vehicles.
Maybe just
It's something we could, like.
fines, you
Yeah.
know, word get out there quick enough for you, so if you do find it there, I guess.
Yeah, and if that's something that council wishes, we can definitely look at new signage for next year, to include those fees on the signs.
I don't know. I'm good with the way they are now.
Well,
I know that if the fine was exorbitant, then I'd say yes, but I think our fines are reasonable, and if somebody, you know, people have to be reasonable people, and if you're parking in a no parking zone, you know, the big cities, city of Ottawa, this is how they make money. Like, those bylaw officers there don't have a lot of heart. That's how they're hired, and I think the first job of their supervisors is just rip the heart out of them. Okay, now go to work, because, you know, we're not giving in. We have to be, you know, we can be reasonable about things, but, you know, there are certain places you can't park, and it makes logical sense. Fire routes are, you know, and the fine is appropriate, right?
Yeah.
You know, I always said in my days sitting at council or even off, you can park Justin by the Bank of Montreal and make his wages plus in one day,
Oh,
because
yeah.
people always stop there, and it is not a very handy place when someone stops there and you got to come around the corner with a truck, right, Don?
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, the room isn't there, so.
I think the signage is good too in that area. I mean, the Giant Tiger thing, I almost thought it was too much signage. Like, I think the point is made. There's a sign every, 3 feet or something? Like, it looked like
It's
there's
the
a
only
lot
way
of-
to make the point,
There's a
though.
lot of signs, so I don't know if adding the fine. You may
Well-
have some people that look at it if it's a $20 or $40 fine? What's this fine,
The
20?
early fee is $20.
Yeah, so seriously, you're sitting there going, oh, look, a parking lot. I'll pay
Parking.
$20 to stay here. Like, you know, so I don't know if putting fees will help, but
Warren, you got any comments?
I mean, that's a council decision for sure. You can put the fines on there if you want. I can't really opine on how the ratepayers will react.
It might only be beneficial if it's a real problem area, but if you're saying the numbers are going down, unless you're gonna put like, you know, $200 fine.
Yeah, I know I don't want to spend money on signs either. Okay. Any other comments on this? Okay, so bring a draft to council, take the early payment out of that schedule, and I think this is, you know, this needs a lot of comment, or this is a lot of administration anyway. Okay. Anything else, Warren?
No, I think that covers it from my end.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much, you and Mally, for participating in our council meeting and giving us the information we need to make our decisions. So thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
thank you.
See ya.
made a liar out of myself. It might be number 330. Yeah, I think we're close enough.
Yeah.
This is, I don't know, there's not much we can discuss about this. Okay, so we're moving on to 5C, which is draft engineering design standards for subdivision and site plan. So you can start on this one and its evolution and how we got to where we are now. So
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this actually manual we've been working on for the last couple of years. We've had, kind of originated back a few years ago when we were looking for a template to have to hand contractors or individuals looking to build subdivisions, a package where it would meet all the criteria that we required before they submit paperwork. Since then, we've been working with EVB Engineering along with meeting staff on a regular basis to update the manual, which tonight, or today I guess, is kind of a final copy that we're looking for council's comments on. And I thought maybe first having Josh here is to kind of go over a high level of this 100 and some page document. And then I have staff here as well too that can comment on any item that council might have. So with that, I guess Josh, you want to kind of just do a quick high level?
Yeah, I guess, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess more or less, like kind of named it, something that staff talked about, and there was some site plan development, I think is what really initiated it. They were doing some things that were definitely not to today's standards and guidelines, but we were kind of having, similar to your previous conversations, we were looking for I don't want to know if teeth is the right word, but just looking for the document that we could enforce just to make sure that people are following today's requirements, and there was really nothing that the township had that kind of dictated what they were looking for. So that's what kind of started this process, and then on top of that, it's also something that really simplifies. Doing a lot of private work, it makes the engineer's job a lot easier because you know what the rules are, and it's kind of just defined for you. So there's no surprises and frustrations through the subdivision process. So, as Shannon pointed out, we sat down and we've gone through this with a number of municipalities in the area. We kind of had a few templates to work from, and we sort of sat down with staff and went through, what South Dundas's requirements were and what their type of guidelines and design standards are going to be moving forward. And, there's a lot of technical data and a lot of information in here, but ultimately, that's what sort of what we were trying to achieve, is just to put everything into this document so that we would be able to set the standards and what we're looking for new developments.
okay, any comments from our Director of Transportation at this time?
I have nothing, no.
Dennis, Supervisor of Water and Wastewater? Okay. Comments from council, if they have read it, and I will confess I have not read this entire document. I superfied glanced it, and that's it.
Yeah, I did look through it. With these documents, my only concern is to make sure that we are still competitive. I'd hate to see South Dundas have a heavy-handed document, and then the neighboring municipalities around us are not having those same rules. I mean, Josh did say that he's dealt with this with a number of municipalities, so we want growth, right? We don't want to make it so horrendous, but I like teeth when we need teeth, and it's very detailed. It's quite the document, but that is actually my only concern, is just to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples with our surrounding municipalities.
Okay, go
Yep,
ahead.
if I can speak to that, and Josh already alluded to it, is that he's worked with other municipalities around here. South Stormont has their document, which I believe a lot of it is similarities between ours. It just might be a little bit different as far as maybe, street lights. We might have a different design than South Stormont, or we might have a preference in regards to water valves over South Stormont, those type of things. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, a lot of it's pretty much similar across municipalities.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say exactly that. It's not really, there's not really anything that's going to dictate in terms of cost or make you less competitive than any other municipality. It's more just kind of setting, for example, they have to put a water main type in, but what type of water main do you guys standard on? What type of hydrants do you guys standard on? I guess some things that you may want to discuss as a team or council would be, we've spoken quite a bit about Ontario Street, the typical cross section we've used there. It's almost, I know it's paved now. We're working on our second course shortly. You guys get an opportunity to see what that looks like. We're dictating in there that for urban sections where we have curb and gutter, that we're dictating that cross section as a standard cross section throughout the municipality. So those are, and sidewalk as well. So those are more of the items where when's council going to dictate that a rural cross section is not required, and you're going to force an urban section, or when's council going to dictate when a sidewalk's going to be required? What size of development? Those are the things that are a little bit more subjective, and you may want to talk about as a team, because those would have cost implications, obviously. But otherwise, beyond that, it's really just kind of dictating to them what kind of materials you want and how you want the work to be completed. It's not really a cost item at all.
Okay, perfect. That, like I said, that's my only thing, and it sounds like further conversations around this will just provide consistency, right? That's what you're looking for? Okay, thank you.
I have no questions, Mr. Mayor. I only got to read about 20 pages of this document, so.
Okay. We're not passing it today, so that, I'll encourage council that they haven't read it to go through it. It is a large document and very technical, and, I appreciate that. It has to be technical, just like our new properties, our draft property standards bylaw. It's fairly technical, but this is the document you need to give to anybody who wants to do any kind of subdivision work in South Dundas, and to be standardized, it does make logical sense. I won't make any more comments. Councillor Mellon?
No, it is you're right, it is a very technical document, and, I could have used the Reader's Digest version, but anyways, we'll take this one. And I think it's something that I think maybe got highlighted with the new subdivision coming in at Dutch Meadows, because we gotta make sure that, any future development, everybody's sort of, on the same, this is what we're required, where, you're not going back and forth, and, let's face it, how many times we go back and forth with, trying to come to an agreement with Swanks, and it's turning out all right, but we want to be consistent across the board. So the next one that comes in, we don't go through the whole process and it drags out for 2 years, Shannon, or whatever, trying to, we'll do this, or do what do you want, so. You're right, Mayor Byvells, it's a needed document and very technical and, way beyond my expertise, if you can imagine. So, but it gives us that template to develop.
Okay. I would have the same concerns Deputy Mayor Gardner had. We still need to be competitive, and we don't want to make a document that if we present it to any land developer, that we get in, they just look at it, we're not doing it, we'll go to North Dundas. I'm not sure I want to compare myself to South Stormont. They have to deal with the city of Cornwall. Our competitors really is North Dundas, not South Stormont. You know, EC, I don't know where Edmondsburg Cardinal is, but they're not really getting the flood of subdivisions in there either. But North Dundas is growing, and you know, if you want growth, you want to make sure you don't want to be walked over, but you want to make sure that you don't have rules and roadways and all this that they look at and say, we can't do it. We're not going to do that kind of work. We're just not going to. We can go somewhere else. I remember working with Swanks on subdivision agreements, and they're not 100 pages long. They were not even 20 pages long. Were they good? They're not as good as this, but I don't see any problems with Meadowbrook. I don't see any problems at West End Terrace. I don't see any problems with Doran Creek. Was everything smooth? No. And maybe that's part of the problem. We didn't have, the rules put out, and, they wanted to negotiate, and that ended up being negotiating. In the end, we come to amicable agreements, and they all got built. Dutch Meadows has been a bit bigger thing to deal with. So my question to I guess to staff and Josh is if you had given this to Swanks before they started Dutch Meadows, how much different is it from the agreement we have now?
So actually, to speak of Dutch Meadows, their engineer, Novatech, has actually been using a lot of this manual just to guide them throughout the process. Am I correct on that, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. We actually shared the manual and draft to both Swink's original engineer as well as Novatech, the new engineer, and both were appreciative of it. Just like I said, in time it took out the guesswork, and I'm quite confident in saying that there's really nothing in here that would make you more or less competitive than anybody else. It really just, you kind of nailed it on the head. It's just consistency and just giving someone, it's almost probably making you more competitive because, at the onset, there's no guesswork. Like, there's no 3 or 4 iterations because, we forgot to tell you that we like it this way, or, we need to tell you that. It streamlines the process for everybody. And if to speak to Councillor Mullins' point, like if you're looking at the Coles Notes versions, I would look at section 2.2, which is where they talk about urban versus rural cross section. And again, just to kind of revisit these discussions, I'm sure we had previously. If you look at section 2.2, it describes where each of those cross sections are applicable, and then if you look at Appendix D, which shows the 2 different cross sections. The urban being identical to what we've done in Ontario Street, and the rural being, virtually identical to what Dutch Meadows is doing with open ditches and no curbs. There's a very, I lost feed there. I don't know if you can still hear me. Okay?
We can hear you, Josh. Go ahead.
So I guess there is a very big cost difference per linear meter of road constructed with a storm sewer versus not, and curbs versus not. So that urban versus rural, there is a cost difference there, and some developers may, like if you were forcing someone to do an urban, like in the city of Cornwall, for example, or the city of Ottawa for that matter, or any major city, they would be forcing urban sections through all of their developments. What South Dundas is doing is similar to what South Stormont is for more like estate-style lots, larger lots. They're allowing a rural cross-section with open ditches. So that's what Swing Subdivision or Dutch Meadows will be doing. Where but they also state that if we're connecting onto an existing street where there is an urban section existing, that they want that urban section to continue. So more, in the center village or in those types of locations, they're asking for urban section. And when your properties become too small, so less than 20 meters, where you're gonna have literally driveway on top of driveway, you're asking for urban section, which I think is a pretty fair compromise between, hard, fast, urban everywhere versus, allowing rural everywhere and having a mess in your hands kind of thing.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilman.
I think this will give us the opportunity to have the technical part of it ironed out instead of, I can remember when we started the whole Dutch Meadows things, a lot of that was so, way over my head. We had to rely on Josh's expertise, and instead of us trying to make the rules up as you go, you have it all there. It'll just make, I don't think it'll discourage anybody from coming to South Dundas, but, it'll make things, I think, flow a lot easier. This is what we have, and, it's not, the give and take sometimes work, and like Mayor Bybel, said, we can get along with a smaller document, but sometimes, in this world, sometimes you need more pages.
Yeah, if I could just add to the size of the document, like I said, there's probably things we're missing in here that, I think as an engineer, when you're working on a project, having something that gives you every answer, is really beneficial, and that's what this is trying to do. So, like, the fact that it's thick or whatever isn't a deterrent. It's more a benefit to it's because it's not that you're making things more restrictive for them. You're just taking out the guesswork, so they don't have to keep calling, asking for questions. It's all there in front of them.
Because I think the roads, water, sewer, and stormwater management are the the big areas that will affect the municipality the most, and probably any neighboring properties. So if you have those taken care of, and are on a consistent basis for any future possible development, it's going to make everybody's job a lot easier. That's the idea of it. We hope.
No. Any further comments over here, this side? Okay, I think what we'll do as council, and I appreciate all the work you did, Josh, and your team, is that we'll get an opportunity to read this over the next several weeks, and then it will be basically it's a tool in the toolbox. As much as it's very dictatorial, every once in a while, if there's a reasonable way of working around some things that make sense in certain projects, I think you got to be at least open to that. Because if you just throw this on the table and not going to do it, well, then I don't want to lose anybody. I think, we'll have a look at it. It's certainly, as I said, it's very technical, and I don't mind technical. It'll give me something to sleep by at night, but that's okay. To be honest, it'll keep me awake, so I'm not going to read it at night. Because last night I got done my reading for.
We actually include in the document an instruction of staff that, like, it's written in here where all deviations you can make deviations at council approval kind of thing. So you definitely have the opportunity to deviate from anything in here.
Yeah, my only hope is, Josh, that the council today will at least appreciate good advice before they make that decision. Because sometimes councilors think that they're better engineers than real engineers, and that sometimes gets us in trouble. Yeah. So, if there's nothing else, then thank you for this, Josh, and have a good afternoon.
Yes, thanks. Same to you folks, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh.
Okay, well, that was quick and easy. We still got an hour and a half yet. We're not going to add to the agenda because that would not be the proper thing to do. So, yes, Director of Transportation, Jeff. Yes, you do. That's I've been told that people need to hear you.
Okay, so one thing we need to consider.
Turn it on.
One thing we need to consider with that manual that Josh just presented was it talked about culverts, and it talked about entrance culverts, and it gave an option of either a HD PE, high density polyethylene pipe, or a corrugated steel pipe. Presently, on our entrance permits, it states steel piping only for entrances. High density polyethylene pipe is allowed for ditch fill-ins within the municipality. If a person wants to modify their driveway, it has to be a CSP pipe. Now this manual is saying that we can do high density polyethylene or corrugated steel. So I think we need to really talk about consistency, that if this is going to be your manual, then we need to change our entrance permit within the municipality. Because if Councillor Mellon comes and asks for a field entrance, I'm telling him a corrugated steel pipe, because that's as per our permit. But now if we're going manual saying one of two. Now I've got to modify the entrance permit to say, okay, you can use high-density polyethylene, plastic, or steel. Just something to consider whenever we're going down this road. Or you can leave them as two separate parcels, but I just don't want the inconsistency to happen out in the public.
Okay, so my comment on that is that when this comes to council, and if you feel that the entrance permit bylaw needs revision, then that's something we can also debate or have a committee of the whole to fine tune. I think a council meeting would fine tune it for the most part. We didn't have a very good one before 2014, and it became a challenging issue in certain areas. So, with your advice and then we could come up with a plan that makes common sense for South Dundas, whether you're in a rural section or a urban section. Certain driveways should have a corrugated steel pipe, certain it's not, it's not maybe as critical, but that's something that you can bring to council and we can make that debate. Okay. Councilor Mellon?
Yeah, thank you. Right now, I remember when we went through the whole culvert thing, right now it's steel right across the whole municipality.
Or if you applied for an entrance application, it states on the permit corrugated steel piping.
Yeah,
For
so
entrances.
even in towns, rural,
Anywhere,
yeah.
anywhere.
I think we need to be consistent. Okay, yeah.
And another thing to consider, and I don't want to jump in on you, but another thing to consider is within the municipality of South Dundas, culverts are the homeowner's responsibility. So if they would choose to put in a high-density polyethylene pipe, plastic, and it fails, they're digging it up because it's at their cost. With the counties, the homeowner installs the pipe. As soon as it's installed to the county's specifications, the counties assume the pipe. So anything that happens moving forward is then out of the back pocket of the counties. We do not have that. So if a homeowner chooses to go high-density polyethylene, I'm okay with it because at the end of the day, it's them fixing it. It's not the municipality fixing it. That's why we went with steel. Farm, ag, industrial equipment's heavy. Plastic has a tendency to go egg-shapey if you're driving something heavy over it. Steel will kind of absorb that weight a little bit. That's why we went with steel, the steel piping. So, But again, at the end of the day, if you choose to change it, I'm okay with it. Because high-density polyethylene now, Mr. Mayor, is better than it was 15, 20 years ago.
I don't disagree. I think that's something you can bring back to council and we can, put your thoughts into it and give us some of your recommendations and we can debate it at council and see where we go. I have some ideas. Everybody has ideas and we're not here to debate it today, so.
No, I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I think that's not a bad idea. Okay. Is there nothing else? For Madam Clerk reads the next motion. Thanks to council for today. It was a lot quicker than I anticipated. Thanks for staff for their reports. Thanks, Rebecca, for reporting on our actions. Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Mellon, second by Councillor Lewis, that council now adjourn to meet again. Call the chair.
All heard the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.